Welcome back to the channel and to the Roundhouse. This week we have a project for the American Freedom Train 250, also known as the Reading 2100 Steam Locomotive. A while ago I made a lapping tool for the stay bolt sleeves on the outside of the boiler that go between the boiler and the firebox. And this is kind of a repeat of that, except it's 4 different sizes for 30 some odd washout plugs on the boiler.
Hello, I am Forrest Nace with American Steam Railroad. A washout plug is basically an area to access the firebox or the boiler itself to be able to put high pressure water in, or using other forcible methods to flush out any sediment that is collected at the bottom of the firebox in an area called the mud ring, or at the bottom of the boiler. So here we're at the mud ring area at the front of the firebox, and the washout plug is right here in this section. And again, this is where the high pressure hose would be put in, or using other forcible methods like high pressure air to force any of the sediment, slag or anything else down there to the bottom that's in the center, to then come out in an area that is accessible. Now here you can see we have the gasket seat. This is the part here that needs lapped. And lapping is a process more or less of truing up and polishing the surface so the gasket, which is copper, mates to it and makes a perfect seal. But here you can start to see there is some areas that have some scratching in them. So here, coming in closer, you can see some areas where pitting has occurred. And again, that lapping will reduce or eliminate this. We have to lap it or polish it down so that way it is perfectly flat. Any more than that, when we run the risk of leaking.
Well, thank you, Forrest. I appreciate that explanation of what a washout plug is and the importance of needing to make sure that they are perfectly sealed, which is why we are now here over at a local machine shop to make these lapping tools. We opted to come here to Blau Machine in order to take advantage of the larger tools that are here. I would love to be able to use the tools in my shop. Unfortunately, my lathe is just a little bit too underpowered in order to make these pieces in a timely fashion. So I have 4 different size lapping tools to make, and they range anywhere from a couple inches up to about 4 inches in diameter. And I need to make 2 of the smaller ones in order to give a couple of teams a lap in order to tackle those sized washouts. There's 30 some washouts that need to be lapped. I think there's 21 of the smaller size. So it just made sense to come over here to this shop, which has some much larger tools. We can take advantage of them and start knocking these out. And the first step is to start cutting out some raw material. So there's this beautiful Peerless Power hacksaw that Chan, the proprietor here of Blau Machine, has in the shop, and it is not speedy, but it's pretty accurate and pretty powerful. So we have a bunch of raw material here to cut out on the hacksaw, and when we get a piece that we can chuck up in the lathe, I'll bring you back. Well, we have a piece of 4140 chucked up into this 1938 Monarch 16-inch W lathe. This thing is a beast. No quick change tool post here. This is all lantern tool post tooling, although Chan does use some carbide insert tooling. First step here, we're going to face this off and turn down the OD to a specific dimension in order to fit into the guide for this lap that we will manufacture later. Along with myself working on these tools, we have Chan, who is the owner of the machine shop, but we also have Rob Gardner, who's the president of American Steam Railroad, and we have Mike Dahlhausen, who is also a volunteer down at ASR. So many hands make light work. This should make this go along a little bit faster, although it is still going to be a lot of work. Unfortunately, the surface finish on this currently is looking like crap, but I think we'll have to address that later. Right now, it's more important that this is sized correctly because the tool has to function more than it has to look good.
Oh, that finish looks a whole lot better.
Yeah.
What did you do?
Sped it up.
You just lower the feed rate at all, or?
No, now we're going 600 RPM versus 171.
Did you say 600?
So let's see, we're right at 125. So I have 6,000ths to come off of this.
Well, with the OD now turned down to size, the next is to start working on the internal features of the lap, starting with this 17/32 inch drill all the way down the center. This will eventually be partially threaded for a bolt that will act as a driver for the lap. the internal of the lap needs to fit over top of the seat of that washout plug. So to get me started here, I've got a large taper shank drill here. I'm putting in the tailstock. I'll use this to bore out the majority of the material and then finish it up with a boring bar. I'll slow the lathe down here a little bit for this size drill. Well, I have to make 2 of these laps and 2 guides. So what I've opted to do is I pulled that other piece out before finishing it, and I've asked someone to cut it off in the bandsaw so it's a bit shorter. And I have a second piece of material here that I'm going to use to make up the second lap. Now, this one I'm actually operating a little bit looser on this one than I did on the first one, because ultimately the only thing that matters is that the OD matches and that there's a decent face for the lap itself. What it looks like on the outside doesn't matter. And normally I would take the time to put in the effort to machine this to the print, but time is of the essence here. There's an FRA inspection that has to happen on the boiler, and all of those laps need to be, all of those washout plug seats need to be lapped and leak-free in order to get that inspection scheduled and passed. So time is of the essence here, so I might be a little bit looser with some of these dimensions. With some of these finishes that I normally would be. Overall, the dimensions, certain aspects of them do matter, and those are the ones that I'm hitting. The other ones, maybe I'm being a little bit more tolerant of them not necessarily matching the print. Rather than cutting this one off to size on the bandsaw, I opted to go ahead and try the cutoff tool here on the Monarch. My little South Bend, as you may all know, is not very rigid in some aspects, and the cutoff tool is definitely one in which it suffers. One of these days I'll address those issues, but for now I'll just suffer along. However, I've got a high-speed steel cutoff blade here in an Armstrong holder. I figure maybe this Monarch being a little beefier, maybe it'll do better than my little South Bend. Yeah, that's where I got it from.
How's it going?
Slow but steady. I'd rather power feed it, but I think I'd have to slow down the speed trying to do that.
Because there's always a risk that you're going to do that. That's a bummer. It dug in.
Oh. It just looks like you tilted the tool though.
Yeah, it did some fun stuff to it. Let's see. I just, besides tapping, cutting off is my next thing I hate doing.
Well, maybe I'm the one that's cursed and it's not my little South Bend. Well, I will reset this cutoff tool, try to get it lined back up. I don't know, maybe I had it a little bit too below center, maybe it was too above center. I'll do what I can to adjust it. These lantern tool post holders, they are super flexible and allow for a lot of adjustability, which is great. But what makes them, not so great is they are super flexible and allow for a lot of adjustability. And if you don't get it just right, with the angle of the tool and not just the left and right angle, but the up and down angle, if that makes any sense, just trying to get it just right. But, I never say quit, so we'll give this another shot and we'll see how it goes.
And I have to be close.
There it is. I call it a win.
Well, I do call that a win. Got it cut off. Now I've got this switched back around so I can finish out the ID. I've got a boring bar here with high-speed steel tool in it. And I'm just trying to bore this down to a size in which this ID will fit over top of that washout plug seat. And that will be the last operation that I'll need to do on the lap. Well, before we can make the guide for that lap, we need to make a gauge for the thread that represents the washout plug. Chan here, who's the owner of the shop, who, by the way, is in his 80s, custom ground this 5 TPI Acme thread high-speed steel tool bit. This particular plug is 3 3/32 by 5 TPI Acme thread. I don't think I've ever seen a thread that is that dimension before. Anything but a nominal dimension. And all of these washout plugs, all 4 sizes, are similar, where the Acme thread is a non-standard size.
Look at that. Going further, right? There we go.
Nice, pretty nice fit too.
Yep, and it's got just a little, nothing wrong with that movement right there.
The next part here to machine for this first lap is a guide. This guide will thread onto that washout plug, which is why we needed to make that gauge. We're getting started over here on one of Chan's Warner and Swayze 1A turret lathes. We've got a piece of raw material in the chuck, and we'll start with facing it off. with this side of the guide faced off, we need to start boring it out for the lap as well as the threads. So we'll start with this small pilot drill here to drill it all the way through, and then we'll follow up with a larger drill before boring it out.
Got my tripod.
What is this going to be?
Well, with that smaller pilot drill finished, now we'll step it up here. We got a larger drill in one of the other tool positions. I believe this was a 2.5 inch twist drill. Well, with that drill complete, I want to get a little bit closer to the final dimension, which we'll finish up on the Monarch. But to get us a little bit closer, we're going to use the boring bar here to make this hole just a little bit wider. Off camera, I did some final machining on that guide when we moved it over here to the Monarch, and now Chan is setting up to machine the 5 TPI internal Acme thread. Yeah, that's a perfect fit. Now I can do a little more work on the outside features of the guide. Well, I'm down here in the basement on this little 14.5-inch South bin. I say that jokingly, of course, since mine's a 13. But compared to all the other lathes, this 14.5-inch is small. Anyhow, doing a little bit of work on the OD features of the guide and maybe trying to get a little bit better of a surface finish. That certainly looks a lot better. Now this lapping set is finished, so I'm going to get these out to the roundhouse and we'll try them out. I'll try it out on this washout plug here that's low enough for me to reach. This one is in the front of the firebox just below the boiler. It's a little bit of a tight fit there. I'm not sure exactly why it's fitting this tight. Might have to check these threads. But it does thread on there, at least a few threads here. The guide certainly does fit. I machined up this hex driver that we can use on the back of it with a socket and a drill. But let's try this out on one of the other washouts up higher. Well, there happen to be a couple of volunteers working up on the top of the boiler where there's some other washouts. So I handed up the guide and the lap to them to try it out in one of the washouts up there. Well, that's going to have to do it for this week because we have 3 more of these lap sets to make, but I'm going to just do that off camera. If you'd like to learn more about the American Freedom Train 250, check the link down in the description. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button, and a special thank you to all those that are supporting the channel on Patreon and PayPal. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.